This tutorial is going to give a quick look at how to do the stylization of a character, or one way of doing it. Now, I'm going to show you this process in Photoshop, but the way that I would want you to do it is in an analog fashion. So with an image, you would lay a piece of transparency film or butter paper or something like that over top of the image and then draw through it. I've done this in a digital fashion just to show you what I'm after. So in this case, if we have a look at this, we have our photograph, and what I've done is I've mocked up putting a piece of butter paper over the top so we can see the image, but it's diluted slightly. The first thing we would do is to put a sketch over top of that image. So if I come in here and have a look and move it around, you can see I'm just sketching over the image and drawing everything in. Now this process of sketching in itself is a simplification from the photograph. And so I just sketch in the main aspects. Roughly, but still giving a reasonable amount of detail. Now with the next bit, I then put another piece of butter paper over top of that. And then at this stage what I do is I draw again, but this time I use a thicker felt pen, like a Sharpie. And the reason for this is when the felt pen's a little bit thicker, it helps to simplify the lines. You can't draw detail in if you're using a felt pen that's a little bit thicker. So if we come in and have a look at this, and I can dial this down a wee bit with the opacity just so you can see what's happening, so we can see the sketch underneath. So using a felt pen is going to simplify it down a bit. Okay, so you can see up here these bits around the top of the crest. I'm simplifying it down into those two strokes. This area around the eye, I've still got this detail around the mouth, but you can see it's starting to simplify those shapes down a little bit. So just going over it in felt pen, but drawing the main line. So I'm starting to lose some of this detail. If we look at the fur down the back of the neck, all this detail is being simplified down a wee bit. So now the next stage with this is, again, I put another piece of butter paper over the top. I can see the whole image, so it's simplified down a wee bit, and now I draw over the top of this again. So let's come in and have a closer look once more. So now if I switch this off, you can see all this detail around the head. I can look at an area around the eye and I can see this as one shape. So I knock out this little bit of detail here and it becomes simplified down somewhat. So, I don't have to do things exactly, but things like this, if I simplify this down, I no longer need to have those spines along the back. So some of that stuff gets removed. This line that comes out past the head sort of starts to join up with this shape around the eye now. So everything's getting kind of simplified down again. Some of these shapes, bits like this, instead of having that thin line coming down the side of the neck, it becomes an arc. The bit across the chest, and we can see that shape coming out there. I'm just kind of drawing it in. So everything becomes simplified down again. So again, at this stage, I can simplify it down even more. So I put another piece of butter paper across the top, and then I simplify it down one more time, and you'll see some of the things that are starting to occur here. So things like this line coming from the eye and going down, I'm now starting to line things up. So you can see that the beak comes in, and when it gets to this point here, the eye shape comes in. It's also the point where the forehead goes up. And what you'll notice as well is the center line for the beak comes through, and instead of this line up here that dictates the color being a bit further up, it comes in like a continuation of the beak line. So shapes are starting to simplify, but also line up to make more elegant shapes. So where these lines converge, that's where the arc comes up. But it doesn't go all the way down the neckline, it just stops here. And these bits with the chest start to become more elegant in their making. I can see that there's a pattern starting to emerge, and so all I do is I kind of exaggerate that slightly. These curves become straighter, this becomes more kind of symmetrical, this arc, it's almost like a circle in there. And then it comes down to form this chest, and as it comes up, instead of it going across flatly, it comes as a nice, smooth, rounded curve. So these shapes are starting to become more elegant. This line comes down the neck, and then the chest comes back in. It's more parallel with the back rather than coming out here. So again, a simplification at one more stage. So we're ending up with a final that's like this. As a drawing, this is starting to define those shapes a lot more and give a lot more clarity to the work. So if we go from there to looking at where we were in the beginning with the sketch, it's a huge simplification down. So rather than trying to get those shapes right from the beginning, because to see these shapes within that original drawing could be quite difficult. And just to show you, I'll just recolor these lines over the top, so we can see the red now, and just to come up with that shape right at the beginning is harder, but when you go through this process of simplifying things down, then it's sometimes an easier way to be able to bring those shapes out and notice them. And you can keep going with this process. There's no number of layers that you're limited to. Sometimes it's a good idea to keep simplifying down until you go so far that it starts to become an abstraction or it becomes unrecognizable. At the moment, it's still easy to see what it is, but it could be simplified. It could be simplified down even more than that. It could be the center line of the beak becomes shortened or becomes removed altogether. Perhaps this neckline comes right from the eye, is further up. These lines become more geometric. They could go straight down, and then it just comes straight down the chest and straight out. So it loses some of this fine curvature. The same with this line here could come down, and then it's a straight angle to the chest and curves round. So we can still simplify things down into more rigid geometric shapes. But this is the process that I want you to undertake, to try this kind of simplifying things down from a photograph or an image in this kind of way.